Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today I've got a full tank review for you of the brand new Tier 8 Czechoslovakian premium heavy tank. It is the Skoda T56. This vehicle has an auto-loading double tap gun that deals 460 damage with each shot, kind of making this thing a bit like a heavy Borask, although it does suffer in a lot of other areas before you start to get your hopes up. In today's video, I'm going to let you know everything there is to know about the Skoda T56, so you can see if possibly you might want to pick one up if the Czechoslovakian heavies look like your thing, or alternatively, if you don't purchase anything in World of Tanks, I'm going to let you know how to deal with these things as you're going to be seeing them on the battlefield worldwide today. So before we get stuck into some gameplay today, let's see how the Skoda T56 holds up compared to its competition. Now, with a vehicle that's kind of novel like this, it's hard to know exactly what to compare it to. I'm going to be comparing it to its Tier 8 tech tree counterpart, the TNH 105-1000, which is a brand new Tier 8 Czechoslovakian heavy tank, the Basonte C45, and also the T77. Immediately, we notice the Skoda T56 has awesome damage per minute, 1,936. Would be great if this vehicle was using a single shotgun, but it's not. It has a 2-round 130mm caliber autoloader that has 460 alpha damage with each of its shots, combined with a 3.5-second intra-clip reload, and this thing is bursting out 920 damage within 3.5 seconds of the first shot. So it shouldn't really be surprising that this immediately makes its tech tree rival, the TNH 105-1000, look really poor, as that vehicle has 320 alpha damage with a 2.5-second intra-clip reload, meaning it deals 640. Not nearly as nice as the 920 on the premium one, right? But on the other hand, when we compare this magazine damage to something like a Basonte C45 that deals 1,080, albeit in 6 seconds, or more importantly, comparing it to the T77, which deals 1,080 damage within 4 seconds, I don't think it's fair to say that this is the new burst daddy of World of Tanks. I'd say that the T77 still holds that title. But remember, the damage per minute of the Skoda T56 at 1,936 base before you start improving it with all of your cruise skills is so much better than all of these other tanks. And remember, while the Basonte looks impressive at 1,800, that gets progressively worse the deeper you go into the magazine. The Skoda T56 reloads in 25 seconds. That's 15 seconds better than the T77. And one thing I loved about this vehicle is that big 130mm caliber gun front loads the damage per minute into that 460 alpha damage. And quite often with autoloaders, you only have a chance to fire a single shot, and then you have the awkward period of reloading, which never really allows you to truly get going with the T77. With my Skoda T56, I found that it wasn't too punishing to fire a single shot, reload for 25 seconds, fire a single shot and reload for 25 seconds when you've got 460 alpha damage. Whereas if I'm in a T77, I quite often find myself really hating the tank if I fire a single shot for 360 and then I have to spend 40 seconds reloading to recover my magazine. However, it's all not good news for the Skoda T56, and that's because the penetration on this tank is awful on its standard rounds. 208mm of penetration pales in comparison compared to the tech tree tank and also to the T77. Luckily, you can load the gold with this vehicle to bump that penetration up to 248, but still, when we compare that to the Basonte's 270mm of high explosive anti-tank rounds and the T77's 299mm of penetration, yeah, the Skoda T56 will require some good marksmanship or flanking positions or just being in a good matchup. This is not going to do very well against Tier 9 and Tier 10 well-armored vehicles unless you try to play a support role and get a little bit sneaky. So now onto the gun handling. This is make or break for an autoloader. And immediately we notice this tank has the worst aim time in this comparison at 3 seconds, the joint worst accuracy at 0.42 along with the Basonte, but things get better when we look at the hidden dispersion values that you wouldn't see unless you go on Tanks GG. 0.2 dispersion when moving and 0.12 when turning the turret is the best in this comparison. And when we combine that with the 4 dispersion after firing, the Skoda T56 does have time to be able to aim with that 3.5-second intra-clip reload. And remember, because the alpha damage is so high, you've delivered 460 with the first shot. You don't mind having to aim for those 3.5 seconds when you're doing so much damage with each of your shots. Another thing which I liked about the tank was 8 degrees of gun depression. A little bit better than its Tier 8 counterpart, but worse than the Basonte and equal to the T77. So now onto the mobility. Is this vehicle going to be kind of like a Borask with that regard? No, it really isn't. This thing is limited to 35 forwards, but a fairly healthy 15 backwards in comparison. This is miles behind its tech tree counterpart, which can go at 50 forwards, the Basonte 50 forwards, and the T77 48 forwards. But luckily, this tank's power to weight ratio is not abysmal. It's actually better than Basonte, but it is worse compared to the TNH 105 1000 and also the T77. So don't feel that you're going to be accelerating up a slope very quickly indeed. This vehicle's incredibly limited top speed would mean that I would strongly recommend considering using a turbocharger on this tank, as its engine power enables it to get up to that new top speed limit of 39 even on medium terrain. And considering that unlike the Basonte and the T77, which have horrific dispersion values after firing when you're turning the gun and when you're turning the hull, you can probably get away without double stacking a rotation device and vertical stabilizers, which will free up a slot for that turbo. Still, even with a turbo, this tank feels sluggish, unlike these other auto-loading heavies, and that can be a real downside for the Skoda T56. So far it's been a bit up and down for this tank. Let's take a look at the armor of the Skoda T56, and this is where the news is actually really good. It's got 100mm of frontal hull armor, 70 at the side, which means that it can side scrape against pretty much everything in the game, and 220mm of frontal turret armor with 95 at the side, making this look like it has the best turret armor in the comparison, along with the tech tree counterpart, the TNH 105 1000, showing that these Czechoslovakian heavies are not glass cannons. But we're going to have to take a closer look, because remember, just what we see on paper doesn't mean anything in the actual model, and immediately we notice that the Skoda T56 is not going to be ricocheting much off the upper hull, especially from equal and higher tier tanks. It's not a disaster. It's fairly well angled, as we can see here, but front on, it's 192mm of effective armor, and the lower plate is down to 164. But this turret's chonky. 260 towards the outer parts here. 152mm of protection on the top of the turret means that you aren't going to get overmatched, even by 155mm caliber guns, although you do have a bit of a turret top weak point. But if you keep this moving, this is a very decent turret. Even if you overturn towards the side, this 50mm of space protection kind of protects the side turret here, giving you still 200mm of effective armor that will be good against high explosive anti-tank and high explosive rounds. One thing that I loved about this tank is this side angled hull. It's shaped a lot like an Object 140, and this means that you can over-angle the vehicle. Try and bait your opponents into shooting the side, and you're still going to have pretty darn good angling. Be warned though, because this crescent-shaped hull means that if you side scrape around a corner, that there's going to be ample opportunity for your opponents to be able to shoot you in your upper hull, and unless you're using some gun depression when you're side scraping, which doesn't usually happen, then you're going to be easy to penetrate there. All in all though, I don't think that this vehicle could be considered to be a glass cannon, especially when you're on a ridgeline using your gun depression. The upper hull becomes an auto ricochet against everything apart from high explosive anti-tank rounds. This is a solid tank which can use its armor situationally to be able to gain the upper hand. Something which, as we all know, the T77 is never capable of doing, even if it's using its gun depression. This decent amount of armor is paired with a big old slab of hit points at 1,500, which is better than the Basonte and the T77, which gives the Skoda T56 the durability to stay alive, to reload, and hopefully vanquish its opponents. However, there's one thing that I didn't like about this tank, and that is the 370 meters view range that the vehicle has, which is trumped by the Basonte's 380. This is not enough to be able to spot your opponents at decent distances, even with good equipment and good crew skills. And your vision on this vehicle, even if you set it up perfectly, is still going to be limited unless you want to make a sacrifice to use coated optics. So for those of you out there who are planning on using the Skoda T56 to train up a crew for your VZ55, the top tier Czechoslovakian heavy tank, you'll be happy to know that the crew loadout works perfectly with a commander, a gunner, a driver, and a loader where the commander is also the radio operator. Now, considering that, I thoroughly recommend you invest a premium crew member there because you're going to want to have recon, situational awareness, as well as Sixth Sense and Brothers in Arms to maximize the terrible view range that this vehicle has. But all of the other crew members, you can probably get away with standard crew members as you're not going to need too many skills on them. However, if you're looking for recommendations, things like Snapshot and Smooth Ride to be able to improve that already good gun handling, and now Intuition on the loader so you can switch out to high explosive rounds, or maybe switch out your gold rounds to regular rounds if you're dealing with a very weakly armored tank and you want to save some credits, can be really nice on a vehicle like this, as you can drop down that 20-second reload to more or less the 4-second mark. Equipment-wise on this vehicle, I personally found best results using vents because everything about the vehicle will improve. A turbo to improve that limited top speed limit. And while this is up to you, I preferred using a rotation device on this vehicle to enhance my traverse speeds on my turret and my hull. Although if you don't have a bounty rotation device, you're probably best to use vertical stabilizers on this tank. Keep in mind, however, that if you use this setup, that you're going to have really bad view range, even if you have a near maxed out crew and you're using a premium consumable like I do, only have 425 meters. So you're probably going to want to drop one of those modules to use coated optics on this tank if you can't stand not being able to spot your opponents. Another option on this vehicle, if you don't care about being fast, is you might want to double stack a rotation device with vertical stabilizers on this tank to be able to gain the ultimate gun handling. But I personally think that would be a mistake, as the vehicle's gun handling is good enough the way that it is. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, I think that's quite enough jibber jabber on the Skoda T56. Let's test it out on the battlefield. So here we go. Skoda T56 versus Berlin, and an all Tier 8 matchup. This tank, as I said when I was reviewing the statistics of it, does pretty darn well against equal tiered opponents and very well against lower tiered opponents. There's something incredibly satisfying about having 920 magazine damage against, for example, a tier 6 medium, which kind of don't even really have that many hit points. It's quite scary in a way. I wouldn't like to have to play against one of these if I was playing in a Cromwell Berlin, for example. The prospect that they're going to be able to shut me down in 3.5 seconds of the first shot, and there's practically nothing that I can do about it unless I fire gold and I manage to hit their weak point on top of their tank or their lower plate, is a little bit terrifying. You can see that I've already used my intuition to be able to load gold with this tank, because I probably needed it to be able to reliably go through the KV5. That is the beautiful thing about having intuition on this tank. And remember, intuition scales with crew skills. And so if you've got things like Brothers in Arms and you're using a premium consumable like T on this vehicle, then that intuition time goes lower and lower and lower. And it allows a vehicle which has poor penetration to be a little bit more convenient. And look at that alpha damage. Whether it's balanced or not, it's tricky. Let's not talk about the conclusion whether a vehicle is balanced right at the start of the gameplay in a tank review, right? All I can say is that is devastating, and we pretty much rolled, well, we rolled completely average with our first shot and nearly average with our subsequent shot. It just seems so bizarre to be able to have this 900 damage. And what's this CS53, sorry, the 53 TP really going to do? Comes out a high alpha damage and module damage. You'll be able to track them consistently, and just like that, 900 hit points blown away. And having the turret armor on this vehicle, I don't even have to worry as if I'm playing a T77. I'd say the Basonte definitely has as good, if not better, turret armor than the Skoda T56. But the problem with the Basonte is its gun isn't even close to being as brutal as this. It's got much less alpha damage, it's got a longer intraclip reload, and if you decide to go deeper into the magazine with the Basonte, then you're going to be suffering with that regard as well. So I feel like I've done about as much as I can from this position. I wasn't expecting the enemy team to push around, but they were doing it anyway. What I wanted to do was try and progress across the northern part of this map, because we've got 2 tier 8 tank destroyers in the form of the Su-101 and also the T-28 that really aren't being very useful. And if I can try and get forwards and get involved with the combat, let the Su-101 know that I'm going to be able to help them out, then maybe we can get a bit of a crossfire in this scenario and we can amplify our team's attack. And this tank, as you can see, it's definitely not quick, but it's by no means sluggish, especially if you manage to use a turbocharger on this tank. However, disaster here. I waste my first shot. The Basante manages to pen me. I tell the T-28 that I'm going to help them. But, oh gosh, we didn't quite manage to shut them down, and the T-28 gets hit by artillery. I press my F8 key to tell my T-28 that I'm going to be reloading, and there's not too much that I can do. But the T-28 should be fine, right? Mr. T-28, what are you doing? You've got one of the best DPMs on any Tier 8 tank, and you're unable to put one round into the Basante. But look at this. As Scorpion, I was thinking about reloading HE rounds at that point, but then I thought that maybe I wouldn't be able to get the clean shots into the Scorpion. Maybe he would have been able to pull back. And then, while I would have looked really clever, I guess, doing 640 damage times by 2, this thing is able to do 1,280 damage within 3.5 seconds if you're able to penetrate both HE rounds. And the HE rounds on this tank have actually got 68mm of pen. I just wish the tank had a little more ammunition that you could carry, and I'd feel a little less guilty about taking more than 2 rounds of high explosive. Just like this, in the first 4 minutes of this game, we're up to 4,000 damage in a kill. Are you seeing just how important damage per minute is in this tank compared to something like a T-77? A T-77 has a bigger magazine, and it delivers it in only half a second longer than the Skoda T-56. But unlike the T-77, which takes forever to reload, this tank really can scale up with its DPM. And clutch shot as well with better gun handling. That is the strength of the Skoda T-56. It might not be the fastest, it might not have God tier hull armor, it might not have the best penetration or accuracy, but for these kind of close quarters engagements, you know, those brawling fights, this tank is awesome. And you can see that we're able to actually bounce a whole magazine from a Progetto 46 there, showing you that if you angle this tank, and you can even over-angle the side, as I highlighted because of the Object 140 Soviet-style hull armor, you can actually kind of be an auto-ricochet in those scenarios unless they manage to hit your lower plate. And that is what I love about the Skoda T-56 and where this tank is going to be awesome. However, if you find yourself on a Prokhorovka, if you find yourself on a Malinovka, if you find yourself against Tier 9 and Tier 10 tanks, especially those that are firing gold at you, and God forbid that they have high explosive anti-tank rounds that can go in up to 85 degrees of angled surface, then you're not going to be so happy. But this was the dream scenario, and we're now going to reload high explosive rounds so we can be able to shut down the... or maybe not. Well, there's the HE, the high explosive anti-tank from the Borsig, as they shut me down as I was trying to load HE to be able to go after them, and were cut down in our prime. Luckily for me, our team have got double the tanks, double the hit points, and they're going to go on to take this one down. Alright, so round 2 it is. We managed to vanquish our opponents on Berlin. Now we're going to be seeing if we can go after them on Kharkiv. So the Skoda T-56 in a Tier 9 matchup. A little bit more scary. Vehicles like the VK4502B, the AMX-30, Char Future 4, 432, and the AE Phase 1, they've all starting to get really good penetration. More than enough to be able to go through me reliably. And if they have high explosive anti-tank rounds, we are massively going to suffer, because our armor is not exactly the thickest, but it's well angled. A lot like on the Tier 10 Polish tank, the CS63, or alternatively when you kind of get those miracle bounces on something like a Batchan. High explosive anti-tank rounds will penetrate up to 85 degrees of angled armor, which means that the angling will not be enough alone. You also need thickness, something that this vehicle doesn't really have, especially on the side, pretty much on the front as well. So I decided to come into a stereotypical heavy tank location. I'm kind of just feeling a little bit awkward. I'm feeling like that person at the party who is very confident, doesn't really know anyone, and doesn't feel like they want to get involved because everybody's already formed massive amounts of friendship circles, and you're feeling a little bit awkward, and then everybody's starting to get off their face, and yeah, everything's just getting more awkward by the minute. So I decide to go outside and see if I can try and woo the Soviet light tank here with my double 130mm gun. I digress. I'm just going to have to roll with it anyway. We put one round into the LTTB, punish them, force them to fall back down, and now that I'm going to have a very quick reload with this tank, with its sub-20 5-second reload, and once you've got it all set up, you can get it down to pretty much the 20-second mark. Now we get to go in again, and as long as I don't mess this up, I should be fine. And put one in, and put a second one in as well before the LTTB reloads. And they actually bounced a gold round off us there, and just like that, a tier 8 Soviet light tank vanquished. And that is how the Skoda T56 can hunt. It has good armor against vehicles like that. It has that lovely double tap. And importantly, because of its decent reload, it can fire one shot. Prepare for the engagement afterwards. And while I guess you could argue something like a Basante would have been able to fire one shot and then not have to waste a reload and would have been able to get the extra one in quicker to be able to go in, you can't deny that the Skoda T56, with its rate of fire, just seems to be able to get the rounds out quickly. And to be able to have that raw DPM even when you're dry, unlike the Basante, feels amazing. So we actually bounce a gold round there off the Chrysler. We put our second round in, and we have to tank 2 shots as we're running away. One thing that I noticed in this game is just how many hit points this tank is. When I'm playing in an autoloader and I get hit by 2 meaty rounds like that from a Chrysler and a 50 TP, I usually expect to look and see that I'm on quite low hit points. Now, they both rolled slightly lower than normal, but it's not like they rolled insanely lower. And consequently, the fact that I'm on like half my hit points right now kind of gives me the durability that I need to be able to continue through the battle. I did feel that when I was playing the Skoda T56 that the hit points do feel a lot higher than you would be used to on other autoloaders, which kind of vibe like this tank does. There we go! We got the Chrysler! We fell back so we could go in again. So thank you to the STA-1 for helping me through that scenario. And it looks like I've got a little buddy in the form of the STA-1 now, which I'm really happy about. So having dealt with the Chrysler, now we're going to reload again, and we're hopefully going to be able to push through this situation with the STA-1. But as you're going to see, I'm about to make a huge blunder in this game, and it was horrible, and I feel so bad about it. But we just got to live with it. Got to explain what I was doing, and that is that I was greedy. I see the 50 TP, I see a 5100, I aim at them, not thinking that they're actually AFK, and then I notice, oh, they are AFK. Now, I realize my mistake, that I'm wasting my time firing at the 5100 when my friend is going all in against the 50 TP prototype, and now I go around the corner and I actually do what I needed to do, which was to probably help them out and be able to put 2 rounds in, not shoot an AFK 5100 that I didn't react to quick enough, and now I feel terrible! The STA-1, who I thought I was going to become best buddies with, actually gets shut down really hard, and while at least I didn't go full greed and shoot the 5100 twice, I did realize what I was doing wrong, and then I went after the 50 TP with my second shot. It wasn't enough, and I should have put both rounds into them, and then maybe the STA-1 would have been able to handle the situation by remaining calmer and putting in the cleaner shots. Nevertheless, here we go! Skoda T56 going off the 50 TP prototype. Here, I know I can be able to take them out in 2 shots. They bounce off my armor. Scorpion bounces off my armor. I put 1 round into the side, and this is a pressure shot. Right down on the turret ring. Beautiful. And that is how the Skoda T56 gets things done. Shutting down the 50 TP prototype, our Polish brother unable to handle the pressure of the Czechoslovakian autoloader. And now we're in a position where hopefully we can go after this Scorpion G that's sitting above me. Although the 8 degrees of gun depression is just not quite enough. Well, actually it is. I lie. It is enough. Just about to be able to get the first shot in, but not the second shot. And oh dear, a Progetto just manages to put a couple of rounds into me. What a dastardly fellow. So I decide to go up to try and finish off the Scorpion G, but we don't now have enough gun depression for the final shot into the Tier 8 German premium tank destroyer. So I'm feeling a little bit irritated. That Progetto 46 managed to get a couple of rounds into us. You can see that it looks like they hit the side of the turret just on the top, and it looks like they maybe even hit the weak point on top of the vehicle as well, or maybe they just went in through the side, through the spaced armor, and through the side of the turret. It's not the best protection. Remember, it's only about 200 millimeters, so of course the Progetto 46, which has more than that, will be able to go through the side of the turret if you're not pointing your gun directly towards them. So I'm asking my team now to be able to go and dig out that pesky Progetto 46 that's stopping me from being able to finish off this game. And it's still pretty close this round, actually. In these kind of scenarios, when you're only ahead by a tank and 1,500 hit points, you do have to be careful. So I asked my team, please flush out the Progetto, because when I go up, I keep getting spotted. And I thought at the time that it was most likely the Progetto that was going to be seeing me in one of those bushes. So I'm just hoping that he doesn't turn around and deal with this AE Phase 1, because if he does, then our hopes are resting on Captain Leopard Prototype with his 1,200 hit points, who he's making his way down the hill now. And if, I guess, the AE Phase 1 doesn't manage to flush out the Progetto, I guess the Leopard will. Luckily for me, the AE Phase 1 does manage to find the kill, and now I'm starting to feel very happy. So I press my affirmative key, and then I spot the VK who's over there, and hoping that my team is going to be able to dig them out. They miss, and so I'm going to pop up and put a clutch shot right into the turret. Must highlight that I'm firing gold right now. Don't think that you could be so reliable if you were not firing gold rounds with a 248mm of pen. But this is a premium tank. It makes full-blooded credits, so as long as you're penning and you're not bouncing, you're still going to make decent amounts in your games. In this situation, I probably should reload. Am I going to bother with intuition to reload to use standard rounds that I only need against the AMX-30, or am I going to keep the gold rounds in case I need them on the 50 TP prototype? And this is where I love this tank. Boom! Oh. Well, I was hoping I was get a second one in, but it was still nice to be able to track the AMX-30. This tank just hits, doesn't it? Look at the kind of damage that we've been doing down here. You know, 492, 442, 424 against the AMX-30. It's just a touch better than a Defender that also gets to fire 3.5 seconds later. And wow, this was a close game with only 1,000 hit points left on our team. We managed to shut down the final 50 TP prototype. And this game is a victory for the Skoda T56. And all in all, just what an absolute solid tank. Sure, it doesn't have everything. It's not the fastest thing you're ever going to play. It doesn't have the best view range. Its burst DPM is great, but it's not the best like the T77. But when you factor in that quick reload for the 2-round burst, with enough armor to be able to put pressure on your opponents, with enough gun depression to be able to work the ridge line, oof, this thing was an absolute performer for me, and one of my better tier 8 premium tanks. At least for the first 10 or 20 games that I played in the vehicle, I was averaging over 3,000 damage per game, which is not bad for a tier 8. And I did feel that even in the situations that this tank was going to have an inevitable defeat, that being able to burst in 920 damage and then more or less reload to be able to go at it again, even doing 2,000 damage in your loss, makes up all your losses, unlike other heavy tanks where when you do get overwhelmed, you don't really feel like you have the clout to be able to fight back, or alternatively, that you don't have the quick DPM to be able to deliver another magazine. I quite often found myself in this tank just wanting to survive the extra 10 seconds to get that extra mag, whereas when I'm playing something like a T77, I'm more thinking about trying to run away entirely and hoping that they don't pen me, which they more or less do because I've got a terrible turret. So on Berlin, it was a first class and a high caliber for the 4,000 damage. So we dealt 1,230 base experience. That pesky Borsig really stopped me from having fun towards the latter part of the battle, but I made a decent amount of credits in this game as we didn't fire that many gold rounds and we were running a credit booster. 151,000 pure profit is lovely. In our next game on Kharkiv, we get a high caliber inside the not best matchmaking for 4,856 damage that we dealt and 1,645 base, showing you that even though this vehicle is unreleased, it's been one of the more tricky ones recently to be able to get a high caliber in. So I expect that a lot of the testers have been doing very well in this tank. And while we did fire 55,000 credits worth of ammunition, we still make 161,000 credits profit, showing you that if you do penetrate the shells, it doesn't really matter if you're firing those gold rounds, as long as, of course, you're running a premium account. So all in all, the Skoda T56, this vehicle is looking like it's going to be a great tank in the hands of somebody who knows how to use an autoloader. That high DPM with the high alpha damage allowed me to brawl and grind in close quarters combat like I haven't been able to in many other tier 8 heavy tanks. There's really something special about 2-round autoloaders. It works on a Borask and it works on an EBR 75, for example. That's because the reaction time for a lot of players in World of Tanks is about 4 or 5 seconds. You can jump round a corner, get your first shot in, just squeeze off the second shot, still within the 3.5 seconds intra-clip reload on this vehicle, and then be able to scurry away, pull back, and hopefully have enough time to deliver another magazine. That is what makes the Borask so outrageously good, is being able to deliver 720 damage within 2 seconds. While this vehicle isn't quite as scary as it possibly could have been, if this thing had had a 3-second intra-clip reload or a 2.5-second intra-clip reload, I think it would have been crazy OP. I still think it's going to be very good in the hands of a decent player, but I don't think it's going to be that friendly in the hands of a new player, especially those that don't know about weak points or alternatively don't load gold rounds. I'm going to quite enjoy playing against poor players when they play against me, when they're playing this vehicle. If I can manage to bounce one of their shells, yeah, 460 isn't too much of a price to pay to be able to deliver 2 or 3 shots to them, irrelevant of what tank I'm playing. Or maybe I can even force the pressure on them with my tier 9s and tier 10s and then brush them aside. As even with gold, these things are going to struggle to be able to get through the front of most tier 9 and tier 10 tanks. So I do think the Skoda T56 is going to be a little bit of a predator that I really don't want to see when I'm playing my tier 6 and my tier 7 vehicles. But I think that there's enough bad things about the vehicle, such as the view range, with also a weak point on top that practically all vehicles can take advantage of, with also that lower plate weakness that kind of balances out the strong aspects of the tank. I still think it's going to be good, if not better than good, but I would also be surprised with the way that statistics are now if this thing is going to become completely outrageously OP, because if this thing is, then so should the Basante and the T77. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was it for today. I really hope you enjoyed this tank review. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If it was useful, especially give it a thumbs up. But if you hated it, give it a thumbs down. Let me know in the comments what you think about the Skoda T56. Do you think this thing looks outrageously good? Do you think this thing looks just good enough? Are you looking forward to playing against this vehicle? Are you looking to be able to pick one up as well? And if you have already played the tank, let me know what you think about it in the comments down below. And right, that's it for me. It's patch day. It's time to go and enjoy the new Czechoslovakian heavy tanks, because I'm going to try and grind through the entire tech tree before my tech tree showcase this Sunday. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.